the emperor's new clothes. Once upon a time, in a faraway kingdom, there lived an emperor who loved clothes more than anything else in the world. He didn't care much about ruling his people, or listening to his advisors, or even going to war. What he loved most was standing in front of his tall golden mirror, dressed in splendid robes, and admiring how fine he looked. Every hour of the day, he was trying on something new: velvet cloaks, silken trousers, coats with jewels sewn into them. He spent so much money on his wardrobe that the people in his kingdom sometimes went hungry, while their ruler cared only about fabrics, patterns, and fancy shoes. One day, two strangers came to the city gates. They called themselves weavers, and they said they could make the most magnificent clothes anyone had ever seen. Their cloth, they explained, had magical properties. Not only was it beautiful beyond imagination, but it was also invisible to anyone who was foolish or unfit for their job. When the emperor heard this, his eyes lit up. Clothes that can show me who is wise and who is unworthy. That is exactly what I need. Bring those weavers to me at once. The two men were brought to the palace, where they set up large looms and pretended to weave. Of course, there was nothing at all on the looms, but they moved their hands as if spinning golden thread, and they whispered to each other about the marvelous patterns. The emperor paid them handsomely in gold and silk, which the tricksters stuffed into their pockets. Soon, the emperor grew curious. He wanted to see how his clothes were coming along, but he was nervous, too. What if he couldn't see the fabric? Would that mean he was unfit to be emperor? So instead of going himself, he sent one of his wise old ministers. The minister entered the workroom, squinted hard at the empty loom, and saw nothing. But he thought, if I admit I see nothing, they will say I am unfit for my position. Everyone will laugh at me. So he cleared his throat and said, "Ah, how beautiful.
Such fine colors. Such delicate patterns."
The two tricksters smiled. Yes, yes. Isn't it lovely? Please, tell the emperor how fine it is." The minister returned to the emperor and reported, "Your Majesty, the fabric is magnificent. You will be the envy of the whole world." Time went by, and the emperor sent another trusted official. The same thing happened. The man saw nothing, but pretended he did, for fear of losing his job. Finally, the emperor himself decided to see his new clothes. He walked into the room, looked at the empty loom, and gasped. "I see nothing. Am I unfit to rule? Am I a fool?" he wondered, but he did not dare say this aloud. Instead, he clapped his hands together and exclaimed, "Marvelous! Splendid! The finest work I have ever seen." The weavers bowed low and asked for scissors, needles, and thread. They pretended to cut the cloth, stitch it, and hold it up for inspection. At last, they declared, "Your Majesty's clothes are ready." The emperor undressed, and the tricksters pretended to drape the invisible garments over him. They tied an imaginary belt around his waist and gestured grandly. "They're such light, airy fabric. It is as if you are wearing nothing at all, yet it suits you perfectly." The emperor twirled before his mirror. He saw only himself in his underclothes, but his courtiers crowded around, nodding and praising. "Exquisite, magnificent. Never have we seen such beauty," they said, though not one of them saw a single thread. The emperor was delighted. "I shall wear my new clothes in the grand procession tomorrow, so all my subjects can admire them." And so, the next day, the emperor paraded through the city streets. His ministers held up his imaginary train. The people, who had heard about the magical fabric, whispered to each other. None wanted to be thought a fool or unfit for their job, so they all cried, "Oh, how splendid! Look at the emperor's fine new clothes!" The emperor smiled proudly, believing every word. But in the middle of the crowd,
A little child tugged at his mother's sleeve and shouted in a clear, high voice, "But the emperor isn't wearing anything at all."
At first there was silence. Then another child giggled. Then someone whispered, "The child is right." Soon the whole crowd was laughing and pointing, shouting, "He has no clothes! The emperor is naked." The emperor's face turned red as a rose. He knew in his heart The people were right. But he was too proud to admit it, so he held his head high, lifted his chin, and continued the procession, though inside he felt very foolish indeed. And from that day forward, he remembered that truth, even from the mouth of a child,
is more valuable than all the fine clothes in the world.
Moral of the story: don't be afraid to speak the truth, even when others stay silent. Sometimes the smallest voice can reveal the biggest truth.